welcome back to the class, everyone. I am very pleased to say that after years and years and years of waiting, we finally have fleet loadouts. And to celebrate this, we are going to be ranking every single fleet in game, and one that's not quite here yet. So as previously mentioned in our intro, we are going to be ranking every single fleet in game, starting with the worst, going all the way up to the best, with the goal being here to shed some light on, for roster building, what fleets you need to build, why you need to build them, where they kind of sit in a player versus player competitive aspect. They're not really used that much in PvE right now, a little bit in TB, but even then, that's kind of lackluster because deployments end up meaning most of anything. One thing I will say before we get started, I tried my best to only make unique fleets so that we don't double dip and end up making like 4 Empire fleets, because you can, depending on how you split it up, you can make 4 different Empire fleets, but you end up reusing so many characters. So the only fleet that we are really going to double dip on, in the sense of we're going to show 1 or 2 different aspects of, is Rebels. And the reason why is because if you have Profundity, your Rebels are going to look vastly one different way, and if you don't have Profundity, they're going to look a very different way. So starting off, since we're starting with the worst fleets, we are going to be looking at Admiral Akbar, assuming you have Profundity. This is just the worst fleet. I mean, there's really nothing nice to say about it. I went and looked up the defensive holds for this for this last season, and it was placed, I think, 353 times. It held like 6 times total, and it was... a lot of the things it was held in against was like Thrawn-led First Order for someone who wasn't really paying attention. I quite honestly just don't really have anything nice to say about this fleet. Ravensclaw's kit is okay. Big's kit is okay. Biston's U-Wing is okay, but they don't have anything that's going to come in and be their saving grace as a backup. Most fleets out there have 1 or 2 really pivotal ships that end up pulling all the weight and bring the fleet into a new light, or really into competitiveness. The fleet just doesn't have one. The Ravensclaw is kind of support in that sense, where he's helping to lift it up, but there's nothing to lift up right now. So that is really the worst fleet out there. But I mean, if you have this is assuming you have Profundity, so maybe it's kind of a non-point. Next up for bad fleets, I guess, or our second worst fleet, is actually going to be the Resistance fleet. Overall, it doesn't really do all that much as far as what it counters. It's a good cleanup fleet, and it's also a good banner stripping fleet, which those are really just 2 ways of saying it's bad. Because if it was good, it would be holding on offense, or it would be beating things, or it would hold on defense, or be beating things on offense. And it's really doing neither of those. In fact, the one thing that I've heard that it beats really well is itself in the mirror. One kind of fun strategy you can do here is if you put Rey's Millennium Falcon into the not the first reinforcement slot, but put it into reinforcements in general and shift something else to the front. It can often come in AoE and steal 3 to 4 banners because they don't give enough time to recover, because you typically have the Raddus fleet just dismantled and destroyed very quickly. So overall, you probably have this if you went after Rey. I still use it just because in Kyber you're required to use 6 fleets, so even the second worst one has a home somewhere, either as a defensive one or as cleaning something up. So not great, but also not entirely terrible. Next up, then, this one's probably going to get a little bit of hate, so we'll probably try to include it actually in with Malevolence. The reason why Finalizer is down this low, and it's still a good fleet, I still use it quite often, is because it just doesn't kill anything super well. In fact, the only thing that it killed with 100% certainty were the old Rebel team that was Akbar with Han's Millennium Falcon and Biggs. It completely destroyed that. That was great. That team really isn't in existence that much anymore, assuming most of your opponents have Profundity. If they don't, then this is actually probably pretty good, which is why it's ranking higher than the 2 previous fleets. And then it can kind of beat a handful of other things semi-well. Unfortunately, again, looking at win rates from this last season, it had a less than 50% win rate against all Executor commons, which is a little bit sad, because it used to be kind of the shining boy when it came to taking out Executor. In fact, it is the best counter we had before we got Profundity and Defender. But the issue is Profundity and Defender, they both exist in the game right now, and they make such quick work of those fleets. So a 50% counter it's doing a lot more than Resistance and or the other Rebel fleet is doing, but it's not really something that I would like to count on. It struggles heavily against Empire. It can't do a lick against Profundity. It does okay, actually, against Negotiator. I've used it several times there, but it's an incredibly nuanced fight that can just kind of go south on you, as most fights against Negotiator can. So, again, certainly not a bad fleet. And in fact, every fleet from here on up, from this kind of First Order Malevolence point, is necessary, because if you're in Kyber, you need 6 fleets, so even the 6th worst fleet ends up being pretty useful. Next up is going to be Malevolence, and Malevolence doesn't have even the shot really at beating Executor or Profundity, or at least more than a 20% win rate, which I can't really call that a counter. But it does beat a wider array of things. It handles Empire super well. It takes down Negotiator as well. Doesn't have any issues with Radis. Obviously beats the First Order comps with ease. The old Akbar team, it'll take out somewhat easily as well. So it has a wide range of things that it can beat. And the only real drawback to it, other than the fact that it can't beat the highest echelon of ships, is the fact that it is pretty much guaranteed crappy banners. And this is a little bit true of GG on the ground as well. His whole kit is based off of his own team dying. So you have the Vulture Droid, which you can either start or put in reinforcements, that actually has a really good reinforcement ability with Blind coming out. But either way, whatever way you use it, one of the whole intentions of the team is for it to actually die and another one to come in its place. The issue with that is, the one that takes its place, you don't get banners for that one being alive or having health or having protection. There's also no protection recovery on this team at all. In fact, I think there's no health recovery, if I remember correctly. There might be a little bit somewhere, but I honestly can't remember anything now that I think about it. So as far as recovery goes, just a very poor fleet in that aspect, but it's honestly kind of, in my opinion, the coolest fleet we have from a pure cool standpoint. I think that it was proof that when it came out, Siege is capable of more than just making OP broken things just to beat the old newest thing, with how the Vulture mechanic, or the Vulture Droid mechanics worked, the overcharge mechanic, as well as the Buzz Droids. It really created a unique experience, and then also getting to watch the giant cannon go off is really stupid fun. So Malevolence coming in there. Next up, and this is kind of what we were referring to at the very beginning of the video, if you don't have Profundity and you're using one sole Rebel fleet, this is kind of where it falls. It's going to fall in between the really good Empire comps up here and between Malevolence and First Order. Overall, it has a pretty good ability to punch up. It can take down the the Executor comp that has the 3 attacking as a starter. It's kind of similar to First Order in the sense that it's not super high of a win rate, but at the same time, it does have a much better shot at beating a larger range of fleets different from First Order. It can take out Negotiator very well. Obviously, handles the mirrors easily. On defense, it will just completely shatter First Order. That's really kind of, I guess, First Order's down point, is they're just not good defensively. But yeah, it has a much wider range of things that it can beat. The only thing that I don't really love about this, and most fleets, not most, but some fleets kind of just fall into this category, there seems to be a heavy amount of RNG, especially considering the basic for Han's Millennium Falcon. I think it's actually might be this unique where you can assist. It's 50%, which that means you can sometimes assist 10 times in a row and sometimes 0 times out of 10 in a row. And that can be very frustrating. So will work most of the time, and results may vary for the rest. Next up is going to be Empire. So there are several ways to break up your Empire fleets. I've chosen just these two because this is currently the two that are taking out Profundity for really good banners, and this Empire comp down here is taking out Executor for pretty decent banners. Both have really good win rates, and overall you can kind of mix and match to also beat Negotiator and to beat a host of other things. The only really thing that goes against them, and why I believe Negotiator is going to be a better fleet overall, is because their defensive viability is pretty low. Malevolence, even, like, it doesn't matter what Empire fleet you put down, it can be the best with all the good things. Malevolence will still rip through it every time. Negotiator itself will have no issues ripping through it every time. The 2 more advanced fleets will beat it. I'm not sure if I would exactly bet on Rebels beating it. But overall, those have a pretty good shot at, but you can mix and match them to beat a slew of different things. Defender and Scythe coming into the game, they're both very good as overall ships, and especially with the Empire comps. One thing I will say that is going to go away here really soon is I'm not sure the ultimate punch-up ability these fleets are going to have, because they're gonna lose all of their non-Empire Sith ships, which that's pretty much Sith Marauder and his bomber. This starts to become an issue because when you look at how the fleets are organized, that only leaves you with one real tank afterwards. And Scythe has been a tank in some ways, but that would mean this top counter is going to fall apart, or this bottom fleet just isn't going to have a tank entirely. So not to say that the fleets are going to go to uselessness, that's definitely not true, but it's going to look differently than it does now once Leviathan comes out, which is going to be very soon from now. Next up is Negotiator. I hate this fleet, guys. This might be just my bias for it. Almost everyone puts it on defense, and it's the only thing in the entire game, whether it be in JC or a different game mode or ground fleet, I don't care. This is the only team that I look at that actively gives me anxiety. I can literally feel my chest start to clench up when I talk about it because it has so many little RNG factors when you're trying to beat it on defense. And what's really sad is it has a lot of counters. Like First Order has a decent chance at beating it. Malevolence has a decent chance at beating it. Empire has a really good chance at beating it. But most of those counters are 1 or 2 RNG steps away, like a dodge or a resist, away from the whole thing just going completely in your face because of the unyielding loyalty buff that our good friend General Kenobi has here, where if he gives it out to them, it pretty much makes them invincible until you can get around to a second turn, but they also stealth, so that makes that a super big pain in the butt. Ahsoka's Dispel is also not fun to deal with because she will not only dispel herself and give herself protection up, but she can also give retribution to the rest of her allies, which is not fun to deal with, especially when Jedi Anakin hits super stinking hard in this team. And on top of that, when everything just seems to be going right, Plo Koon comes in. Not only does he dispel everything, but he also heals 40% health and 40% protection. Probably the most broken reinforcement in game. So yeah, I just hate the fleet. It is beatable by all standards, but the chance that something just blows up in your face are higher than I would ever like them to be. And on an offensive note, it does really well. It can beat Empire. It can actually beat our good friend, and this is going to be above it, can even beat the Executor fleet up here at the very top. If you have a fast enough Plo Koon or using Vader, they're a bit of a weird strategy, but it's something that works and can be, for a player who has no other solution to the Executor up top, it can be nice, and that's its fullest potential, so that's just where we're going to leave it. So maybe I'm wrong, but I hate you, Negotiator. I hate you. Next up is going to be Profundity, and this is kind of obvious. Like, the two top fleets are their Executor and Profundity. That really goes without saying. Both in the requirements are proof of that, and also they just beat everything and have really good mechanics worked in to ensure that they consistently do that. The only real reason why we're putting the Profundity on a lower tier than Executor is because Empire has the Rebels number, or not Empire, yeah, Empire has the Rebels number significantly more than the First Order has the Executor's number, and that's really what it comes down to. Empire can beat this team pretty consistently for about an 80% win rate. First Order only has 50 or 60% win rate against Executor, and I know those numbers have been, actually they really haven't ever been higher than that. I think even in that counter's heyday when everyone was using it, was really only close to, I think, 64 or something like that. It was never very absolute. You could always do little tweaks here and there to make it just a little bit better, but it was never fully 100% or not nearly as good as the Empire counter is to Profundity. So still very good. Still a very good fleet, and well, the best fleet actually Executor currently is. Profundity is amazing, especially on offense. It, like Executor, just beats everything, so can't really hold that against it. And then the best fleet, and I guess we're gonna play Future Man here, it's gonna be the Sith fleet. From the wording they've been using in the release, it definitely comes off like it's going to be maybe not largely more impactful than Executor and Profundity, but it's going to be above them. And that does scare me a little bit, and I mean, we really can't make any comments as to how the fleet functions without actually having the fleet. I don't know what Mace is doing, by the way. One thing that was kind of fun here is I clicked the unique option here for the fleet loadouts, and basically that means you can't repeat ships. So if we go all the way down here and remove my repeat offender rebel team here, there actually aren't any more fleets that we can add, like literally nothing. This is using every single starfighter currently in game as I have them all unlocked. So Mace is going to just be left out in the cold, and even his buddy Sith Fighter, who had been hanging out with him, is probably going to get transported over to the new Sith fleet. So I'm guessing this is going to be first. We'll see when time comes. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually executor level at the beginning, and then it'll get buffed. Who's to say? We're still a minute out from that. So thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, CG, for finally putting fleet loadouts. Better late than never, I guess. But until the next time, guys, stay awesome.